back to Brexit. And you could argue the problem is not the Irish border, the problem is Brexit. But whichever way around you turn the telescope, negotiations between the UK and the European Union appear to be at an impasse on that issue. How do you honour the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement, which assumed that the Irish border would always be open when it becomes an external frontier of the European Union, and at the same time respect the rights of people in Northern Ireland to define their identity as Irish and therefore European or British, or indeed both together? Well, now, let's discuss this with Mick Fealty, who edits the political blog Slugger O'Toole, and Dr. Etain Tannam from Trinity College, Dublin. Very good evening to you both. And I want to start with you, Dr. Tannam, and ask you, I mean, it's very few people, and I hope you do, follow the exact ins and outs of the negotiations or the jousting between the UK and the European Union at the moment. But do you think that some kind of agreement, even if it's a fudged agreement, is getting closer on this issue?
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's it's been very painstaking. It's been very destructive in many ways since June 2016. But I think in a very step-by-step process, I think an agreement is possible. I mean, no one expected anything from Salzburg, really. So I think, between now and October, there will be more progress. And then, in November, hopefully, finally, some kind of agreement. I mean, I don't like predicting, because I didn't predict Brexit happening. But I think there is scope for an agreement. I mean, the technical note from the UK government, the white paper itself, there were some, small shifts. And of course, the constraints of British politics and the fragility of the British government and all those issues. But nevertheless, I think there is some space. And although the EU has emphasised the need for Theresa May to compromise, I think they have shown also that within that context, there's a scope for them to compromise as well. So,
yeah, Mick Fealty, I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, a little bit of compromise, it seems, from the European Union's side, but the DUP, the Democratic Unions, still don't like it.
They still don't like it, but it is a confidence and supply arrangement. It's not they're not a coalition partner. The incentives for them to stay in to the bitter end, I think, are massive. Because at the moment, we talk about the Good Friday Agreement, but there's no government at Stormont. And what's worse than that, nobody seems to have noticed that they're not even there anymore. So the DUP has one major game to play. And I don't think on this one they're going to really cut up too rough. They don't have sufficient capital to be able to do it. What I think is really happening, when you look at the kind of the more wider structures, I think Barnier's suggestion that we need to de-dramatise this coincides with the fact that for the first time, the heads of states are going to get involved in this negotiation. And whether anybody likes the end result or not, one of the things the European Union is really good at is coming to an agreement. And the date on the Article 50 terms mean that it's going to happen. And a deal, I think, will be struck as we move away from negotiations towards the deal itself.
I want to ask you both this, and Dr. Tannam, you start with it. I mean, the deal is struck, but the fact is, come Brexit, then the border, porous or not, soft border, is a border. It's a border between a non-European Union country and one that remains in the European Union. What does that change, then, on the island of Ireland?
Well, I think the Irish government's position is that that border should not change in its significance at the moment in terms of being a soft border. I mean, that's the whole point of the backstop arrangement and the dedication to having that as legal text. So the aim is really from the Irish government and the EU side, not just the Irish government, they're all on the team together, that that border does not change in terms of becoming harder because of Brexit. And I do think, as Mick has said, I think there's scope for bespoke arrangements that the EU is so good at, and compromise around that, to achieve that end. I mean, already in terms of Northern Ireland being an integral part of the UK, there are already differences between Northern Ireland and Britain and between Wales and Scotland. So, the Good Friday Agreement itself is a bespoke, unique arrangement. So I think the short answer is the aim is that it won't change, that things won't get worse because of the backstop, and because an agreement will be reached in a more general package. But the significance, though, really, I mean, if that didn't happen, if that's the question, is that it would be catastrophic. I mean, in terms of political symbolism, it would be destabilizing because it just resurrects, the whole origins of the conflict. And then in terms of people's lives, because 30,000 people cross the border every day. The agri-food industry, there's sort of various industries that rely on it. So that would be catastrophic if it didn't happen.
All right. Just want to bring in Mick on that. Mick Fealty, I saw you nodding your head to a lot of that. But let me add in the idea of just people's mindset, particularly in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, of course, voted to remain. Is there a growing sense, and cross-community sense, that if you want to remain in the European Union, then under the Good Friday Agreement, you can be Irish, so obviously you can keep the passport. But is there a growing, perhaps, not mass momentum, but a growing feeling that perhaps this vote on unification should take place sometime?
No, that is a horse of a completely different colour, to quote the Wizard of Oz. The two issues are separate, but I think one thing that's been clear is there have been an awful lot of pragmatism. There's an awful lot of pragmatism amongst people who would never have got an Irish passport before. We see record demands for Irish passports. The whole passport system's been completely slimlined to meet that demand. And I think culturally that probably is a soft shift. But I think at the end of the day, when we get to the deal, people will know what the economic implications of the new deal is, and their fears will either be assuaged by that or will be increased by that. What is absolutely true is that Brexit has it didn't create the collapse of Stormont, but it has created a political instability in the relationship between the British and Irish states, such that there's insufficient will to try and put that Good Friday Agreement to get back together again. And it's, we're nearly 2 years into this hiatus.
Well, let's press on the worst scab, I suppose, concerning Northern Ireland. And Dr. Tannam, within a vacuum, with instability around, with huge change around, is there a threat to the peace process? Is there a danger of some kind of campaign restarting?
I think in the short term, no, and hopefully the medium term and hopefully the long term. But I think Mick is right. The whole peace process rested so much on British-Irish strong intervention and cooperation of both governments, and that's been missing. So I think that kind of leadership is needed. It underpinned the Good Friday Agreement. And I think, there have been efforts to resuscitate that. I think the problem is the British government has been so overburdened that trying to get that focus, that kind of focus back on the British side has been very difficult. But I know Irish diplomats have been really, dedicated to trying emphasising that importance. So I think it is destabilising, as Mick said, and this sort of polarisation that's come into rhetoric, even between British and Irish governments at times, but in Northern Ireland because of Brexit, is destabilising. But I wouldn't foresee violence occurring necessarily, but it needs to be managed and the backstop needs to be protected. That is essential.
Just Mick Fealty very quickly on that. If it was hard Brexit and hard border with all its infrastructure, that would be a danger, presumably.
It would. And that is what people call the backstop. As Micheál Martin, who's the leader of the Fianna Fáil party, the opposition party in the Republic, says, let's stop talking about the backstop, because backstop means failure. We have to up our ambitions to try and get some kind of a deal. The problem with Northern Ireland isn't that it will slip back into violence. It will slip back into permanent failure, and that becomes a problem for both states.
Fascinating talking to you both. Dr. Tannam, thank you very much indeed for your insight and your expertise. Mick Fealty, very good to see you.